when I'm with you. There's no one else around. Yeah, I'm so high, gravity can't hold me down. Imagine faith and hope so alive. You got me feeling so good, 'cause baby, you're alive.
And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is, your biggest issue is, how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war. This is our World War II. I think that the part of it that is generational is that millennials and people and, you know, Gen Z and all these folks that come after us are looking up, and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is, your biggest issue is, how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war.
Hey everybody, it's Leslie with Me, Myself, and Liberty here on OTU, and we have some breaking news. According to climate expert Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, the world is ending in 12 years if we don't address climate change. Wait a minute, so she's not wait a minute, I thought she was a scientist. Is she not a scientist?
She's a bartender.
Oh, she's a bartender. Okay. Well, obviously, bartenders know a little something about climate change. Well, she's a Democrat, so that makes her an expert. So no matter what, the world is ending in 12 years because we have this whole climate change thing going on. So we have got to get prepared, and I am taking this seriously. So part of that is I have an expert, Jeff Gerwich, joining me today. And Jeff is pretty impressive. He's going to help us protect ourselves when the stuff hits the fan, as we say. So Jeff Gerwich is a retired Special Forces soldier who served 26 years in the United States Army, 19 years of that Special Forces. He served in the first Gulf War, 3 tours OIF, and 3 tours OEF. He is a contributing writer for the SWAT magazine and DefenseReview.com. He's also an avid competitive shooter, competing in USPSA, IDPA, and 3-gun. Welcome, Jeff Gerwich, to the show. Hello, Jeff.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So your daughter does some shooting too, right?
Yes. She started competitive shooting about 2 years ago.
All right. So what's that like, teaching your daughter to shoot?
Well, I based it all on when she was big enough to handle a regular full-size pistol. So about 15 years old, she could handle a 9mm full size, and I just started with the basics, and it took only about 4 weeks, and she was ready for her first gun match. Oh
wow! I've seen the videos, and we're going to share some images and video here in just a minute. I've always wondered, you know, we have 6 kids, Chad and I, and 5 are boys, and none of them are real shooters, which is surprising. So we've got to get on that. We might have to have Jeff come and train them, but Gracie is quite the natural at it. So let's show some images of Gracie, and let's show her video.
Stand by.
Everyone believes when someone says we're gonna see the end of days. We're the only thing we'll ever know. We won't be here tomorrow.
Hey! Stand by.
The sky start falling.
When who said
You're ready? Stand
Bye. Get the last steel plate. Hey! Road is so clear.
All right, welcome back to Me, Myself, and Liberty. This is Leslie Nesmith, and I have Jeff Gerwich with me today. He is a firearms expert, and he is one of our treasured veterans of the United States Army. We are talking about firearms, and we are looking at holsters, how to carry. So this is a fantastic question. So so we have to put this in the framework of the apocalypse. But we also need to, think about everyday carry too. So, Jeff, what would you say? So, what are your thoughts on holsters, how to carry? I'm of the mindset of you need to carry in a consistent place. I carry in a consistent place every day, just so that when I do need to reach for it, it's where I reach. So, what are your thoughts on holsters and where to carry?
Well, when I think of holsters or carrying a firearm, it's a whole system. So I have two pet peeves. One is you go out and you buy a $500 pistol and you have a $20 nylon holster that you're trying to carry it in. And worse is if you do get a $500 pistol and say a high quality $100 holster, you're hanging it off of a $20 belt that you got from Kmart, which cannot properly support this. So if you're going to spend the money on the firearm, you have to spend the money on a quality holster and a quality belt to support that holster if it's the type of holster that requires a belt.
Okay, so what do you think about, because this is, some people may not know this, but I actually owned a store and we sold all kinds of self-defense products. But one of the questions I got was, inside waistband, outside the waistband, types of holsters, the quick release holsters. And I know you have opinions on these because we've discussed it. But so, and I realize what's good for you isn't going to be necessarily what's good for everyone. But what are some considerations when we talk about inside the waistband, maybe appendix carry versus, the back versus the arm. What are your thoughts on that and types of holsters? And do you have any that you recommend? Or do you have any that you don't recommend? They're just complete crap.
Great question. There's tons I don't recommend. But starting with the beginning. So, carrying a pistol is all about being able to conceal it if that's the route you want to go, and comfort. And everybody has a different body shape, body style. So I like to wear strong side outside the waistband. That fits my waist. I can conceal just about any size pistol with a quality holster. But that may not work for some people. So really, it's just of deciding on how is this gun actually going to ride in your waistband. So I would literally start at the front with appendix carry and just, place the gun there, see if it feels comfortable, and then work your way around to what they consider strong side off your shooting hand, which is just back of your hip bone, and decide if that's the most comfortable spot. And then from there, you can actually select the style of holster, and if you're going to go inside or outside. Again, I like outside the waistband, and for that style of holster, I'm looking at retention, not so much some sort of locking lever, but at least a holster that's sturdy enough that if somebody tries to grab the gun from an odd angle, like from behind me or from the side, the pistol's not going to come out except straight up.
They will meet death if they try to grab your gun, aren't they?
Well, I'll try box my way to make space to pull it. But that goes back to my biggest pet peeve. You just see these pistols hanging on these nylon holsters that have zero retention. If you look at law enforcement shooting, a big percentage of law enforcement that get shot are with their own guns from their gun being taken away. So they'll put a lot of time and effort into selecting holsters that have the most retention to keep that from happening. So if you're going to carry a gun, ultimately whatever method you decide to carry, inside the waistband, outside, or appendix carry, the holster needs to be sturdy enough to help prevent some of these gun crimes.
Yeah, those are all great points. And it actually took me a little while to decide what was the best spot for me to carry. And being a woman, we're always we go into these stores and they want to sell us handbags and all this other stuff. I've never been a concealed carry it in a handbag because one, most likely if I'm a female and I'm in a self-defense situation, it's because they want what's in my handbag. So they're going to, unless it's one of those anti-cut sort of rigs, they're going to be able to get it from you and run away with it. But for me, under the arm, that's what I have found for me is the most comfortable. And with women, we're a little bit more concerned about looking bulky or adding any extra, inches or pounds or anything like that. Guys tend to, guys probably go the other way. They want to add some, inches or pounds, but women are not that way. So what are your thoughts on, and I think we're probably going to be along the same lines here, on concealed versus open carry?
I'm all for concealed carry. I'd rather people not know I'm carrying a firearm. When I see people open carry, yes, it can be a deterrent because people see you and be like, oh, that guy's armed, I'll stay away. But also it makes me think that, if you're walking around with a gun exposed, to me it's like saying, hey, come and try and take my gun. So I'm not really for open carry. I'd rather, be the unknown, concealed carry, nobody knows I'm armed. And you just don't draw negative attention for people who are anti-gun. You can go into a lot more places, basically unnoticed because you're not carrying a firearm. I don't want a bunch of people staring at me because I'm armed.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I rarely open carry. If I'm open carrying, it's in a group of people who are open carrying. I do have a lot of friends that open carry, and they have very, I think, valid reasons for that. But I'm also the type that sometimes I want to carry my gun places that most people might not normally carry their gun, and I don't want people to know that I have it on me. So, and I also don't want to be the first target. So that's the other thing is if you're in a situation and there is an active shooter, they're going to take out the people that they're going to take out the people in the MAGA hats first because we're, crazy. There it goes. We're crazy people. And we've got guns. Everybody with a MAGA hat has a gun. So, all right. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk to Jeff Gerwich some more about training and what we need to do to be trained and ready for the apocalypse.
And until we all start pitching in and holding people accountable, I'm just going to let them have it.
It's going to break down. Is it in 2040? You know, it's just kind of just sort of slightly, so they don't actually. It's sort of slightly over the horizon, or it's just on the horizon. So we're aware of 2040, but you know, we're not going to be held to our forecast. Even during the Nazi period, you see this strain of anti-industrialization, and it happens to be the case that the first political party anywhere in the world to have a wind power program was the Nazi Party. And 6 weeks after invading the Soviet Union, Adolf Hitler was telling his dinner companions that wind power is the future.
Spend trillions of dollars that we don't have over a couple decades. It would totally destroy the coal and fossil fuel industry. And with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's constantly wrong, but never in doubt. She's walking the halls of Congress trying to get people to sign up for this thing. But again, it's only going to further disenfranchise middle America to the Democrat Party. But she's definitely catering to the elites in Malibu and Manhattan. But
And we're back. Welcome back to Me, Myself, and Liberty. I'm Leslie Nesmith, and I have Jeff Gerwich with me today. He is our gun expert, firearms expert. And we're talking about the apocalypse and what we need to do to be prepared, and what type of gun, what type of weapon we need to be prepared when the AOCs of the world take over. Okay, so we were talking about holsters, that sort of thing. Now, what are your preferred, what's your thoughts on holsters and with regard to training? Because some people, they go to the range, they bust, caps 300 rounds, and they never pull it from a holster. So let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, you're right. If you own a pistol and you're going to carry it, you need to be practicing the way you carry it. Kind of a nerd. For every pistol I buy, I usually buy 3 different holsters. I like an outside the waistband. I like an inside the waistband, depending on how well I need to conceal a gun. Because I shoot competition, I usually buy a competition holster. The thing that stays the same is they all ride in the same spot on my hip. So, I'm building up that, what they usually call muscle memory. My hand goes exactly where it needs to go when I draw the gun. So if you're going to own a firearm, you need to definitely practice with it the way you intend for it to be utilized. So if you're carrying it for protection and you're not practicing drawing from the holster and drawing from the holster with a shirt over it while you're at the range, then you're building up false confidence, because when the time comes, you're going to revert back to the basics of what you know. So if you're not used to drawing the gun from a holster, you're not going to be able to do it that well under stress. So it's all about building up that inoculation to stress. So if you end up in an unfortunate situation where your life depends on it, your brain can go on autopilot and your hand goes right to the holster because you've trained that way, hundreds of times on the range.
Okay. So was there anything else any other thoughts on holsters or preferences or anything that people need to give some consideration to that you can think of?
Really, probably the holster construction. They all have their pros and cons. There's leather, there's Kydex. I used to be an all leather guy, but now I'm a Kydex type holster guy, and that's for outside the waistband and inside the waistband. 1, they're pretty cheap, and 2, from a security standpoint, going back to that whole gun grab, most quality Kydex holsters won't allow you to draw the gun except for straight up. So again, somebody can't come up behind you and easily get the pistol out of your holster.
Okay. So with regard to training, this is really important because I actually have a friend. I'm not going to name any names or put anybody out there, but I have a friend that the only time this person has shot their gun is when they took the class, the SDA class here in Oklahoma. So that's not good. That is a really bad idea. So let's talk about training. This is another area of your expertise. Training. how often one should train, where to get training, and something that you touched on just a minute ago was, pulling your gun from a holster. Now, a lot of ranges don't allow that. I know that I've been to some that they don't allow it. So your options are going to an outdoor range or maybe a range that does allow that. So some people may not realize that, but let's talk about training.
Well, I mean, if you own a firearm, you truly owe it to yourself to get some training. I mean, if you look at the amount of hours you spend in driver's training before you're allowed to drive a car, and compare that to owning a firearm, most states, the minimum requirement is like some sort of 8-hour class with, you fire 100 rounds or so on the range. And that's really just to prove minimum competency with that firearm. It's not really showing any sort of training level. So along with being able to shoot the gun, you honestly need to learn the laws of your state in regards to if you can use lethal force. Because there's a big difference between different states and what they consider would be justified lethal force. So if you're carrying a gun, you really don't know what would be considered, adequate use of it in your state. You're kind of like you're walking around with blinders on because you could use it in a situation where you think you're justified and then find out after the fact that you were way out of the envelope for justification. And then, of course, now you're looking at, really, ruining your life, ruining somebody else's life, ending somebody else's life when you thought you had justification, and of course you did.
Like shooting your daughter's prom date or, something like that might be justified in Oklahoma where it may not be justified in, say, North Carolina.
That's one heck of a state law if that's allowed.
All right. So on training, so what, I know we've touched on this a little bit, but what else okay, so you do a lot of, you have some videos that you put out there on YouTube, that kind of thing. What kind of training? Okay, so you have the training at the range and going and shooting at a target, and then you have some that I've had the pleasure of doing with you, the moving and shooting and the 2-gun, and we've shot with our ARs and our handgun. So let's talk about that. And of course, now in an apocalyptic situation, we don't even have to worry about rules, which is awesome. So that's something else to think about is when the apocalypse happens, we're not going to worry about the state laws or the federal laws or anything. We're just going to go, cowboy on everybody. But so let's talk about that for a little bit. The training aspect. What other thoughts do you have on that?
Right now there's probably dozens upon dozens of pretty reputable tactical training schools and instructors that you can find online for your state. If you're going to carry a firearm for the purposes of self-defense, I do recommend, seeking out some sort of tactical training, a 1-day course, 2-day course. But the other venue, and you talked about not being able to draw from the holster at some of these ranges, where you can practice drawing from the holster is in competition. That's why I started competitive shooting. You have to draw from the holster. There's a specific sport called IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association, where the competition is based around self-defense scenarios. You're forced to carry concealed. You're forced to use the holster you would use in a self-defense situation. So if you're looking to build up your skill and you really don't want to, take formal classes, or you want to add to your formal classes, that's why I got into sport shooting, because all these places that don't allow, draw from the holster or this or that, you can find a match and you can compete in these matches that build upon self-defense skills or just marksmanship skills, moving safely with a firearm, shooting multiple shots, shooting targets. That's why I compete in 3 different shooting leagues. Actually, I just picked up a 4th shooting league. I just started long-range precision shooting, whole other realm, and it's pretty fun.
Okay. So something that I just thought of was a new shooter is not going to think about keeping a round chambered. It's important to always keep one in the chamber. So do you have any additional thoughts on that, or I assume we agree on that point?
Yes. You need a quality holster. If you're going to carry around in the chamber, which you should, you don't want some cheap nylon holster where your gun's going to bounce around and be a safety hazard. So quality holster secures the gun. And that gets back to going out and practicing at the range and being comfortable drawing that weapon, finger off the trigger to identify the threat and you're ready to shoot. If you think you're going to be able to, rack the slide and get the gun into operation under stress, if you don't practice it all the time, I know there's the Israeli method where they purposely don't carry around in the chamber, but they start their whole basis of carrying a gun is built around that, so they're well trained on it. I don't really recommend it, but buy a firearm that has a manual safety if you're worried about a round in the chamber. That's why I like the M&P, the Smith & Wesson M&P 9C. You can get one with a thumb safety. It's a compact size pistol, but look at those styles of pistols that if you're uncomfortable and you don't trust, say, a Glock safe action trigger, then look at a gun with a manual safety that you can carry around in the chamber.
Something as you're speaking, I started thinking about is there have been 2 times, I've never served in the military or anything like that, so I can't claim that, but there have been 2 times that I have thought that I was going to have to use my gun in self-defense. And both times I was prepared. And I know we're, talking about the apocalypse, but realistically, probably most of the people watching right now, they're more interested in, practical application. And, one of the things that I talk about in my self-defense class is, being prepared and having a plan. Because in both situations, so one situation for me, I was in my house. I won't go into that whole entire story, but basically somebody entered my house. I wasn't expecting anyone, and there had been some recent, break-ins in our area. And so having gone through this so many times and trained so many people on it, it was just autopilot for me. So I went through with my plan, which isn't you don't know how many people are physically entering your house. I mean, it could be, 5 or 6, it could be 1, you don't know. So in that particular situation, I went to exactly what I knew. I had my gun either on me or close to me while in my house, and I went to the master bedroom, which is the first place people don't realize is an intruder's going to go, is typically to the master bedroom. And I closed my door, sat on my bed, and waited for the person to come enter my room so that I could just shoot them coming through the door. And the second time was actually in a public place at our old retail store. But both times I had a plan, had gone through it, had my gun, had practiced with it, had it on me, knew my holster, and knew what to do and understood what the consequences would be. So do you have any comments on that before we get to legal considerations? Because I know that's going to be one thing that we need to talk about.
Well, I mean, you framed it perfectly. Because you trained with your firearm, you're used to it. It's great. It gives you that peace of mind. God forbid the worst case scenario, somebody had come through the door. At least you had a plan, and because you trained, you were automatically, going in that direction to be able to defend yourself, defend family members. That's a lot better than just buying a firearm, taking to the range maybe once a year, and then you're living on hopes and dreams that you'll be able to rise to that level, of expectation to defend yourself. If you never practice with a firearm, because chances are you probably won't. And the worst thing you want to happen, obviously, is you do draw your pistol to defend yourself. You never train on it. You end up either one getting taken away by the assailant, or you do end up firing, and because you never go to the range and practice, God forbid you hit with your own family members, or something tragic like that. So definitely practicing with a firearm, practicing the way you're going, you intend to employ it if you have to, and, having a plan based on, your house and your family and your situation. Owning a firearm is part of an entire system. It's just a tool for that system. So I think you framed it perfectly. I mean, it gave you that peace of mind, and for you to be able to calm and rationally think through the situation, hey, if I have an intruder, this is how I'm going to handle it. And it worked out. You didn't have to. And so just owning that firearm, gave you that peace of mind.
That's right. Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. We're talking to Jeff Gerwich.
Are you ready? Stand by. Show clear. All right. Thank you.
Welcome back. We're talking to Jeff Gerwich about what happens when the apocalypse happens and we need to be prepared with our firearm. Okay, so Jeff, one thing that we've got to talk about is the legal considerations. And I know, we have, state law and all that, but so talk about your thoughts on that and the carry insurance and that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you're gonna carry a firearm, it behooves you to find out what the state laws are, and if you have a permit that allows you, like my permit's good for basically the entire East Coast and most of the Midwest, as most states have agreements with each other. So finding out exactly what is justified and is not justified. And I'll use Tennessee and North Carolina example because I was a permit holder in Tennessee for about 10 years, and now I'm a North Carolina permit holder. And in Tennessee, the law was it was assumed that if a burglar was in your house, he was there to cause bodily harm. It was assumed right off the bat. So you were legally allowed to, shoot the person if you thought your life would threaten. Whereas in, North Carolina and other states, the law could be, they have to actually try to physically attack you and cause grievous bodily harm to you for you to use your weapon. So you have same instances. Somebody's in your house. In one state, it's justified. Hey, they're in your house. It's assumed they're there to cause harm. In another state, they actually must, show some sort of intent or action against you before you can legally use that firearm. So that's why it behooves you to find out the laws for where you live, so you don't get yourself in trouble, carrying that firearm if you do have to employ it.
Yeah, and also the carry insurance aspect of it. I have carry insurance. We do.
I have carry insurance also. I think the insurance plan I'm under right now is $140 a year, which is really nothing, and provides a pretty good level of coverage. That if I do have to defend myself, in a situation that I have that that something to fall back on. Because if you use your firearm to defend yourself, even if you're not found guilty, by the law, that doesn't, exclude you from any sort of civil action to be taken against you. So, if you're going to carry a firearm, you need quality firearm, quality holster and belt, and, look at the insurance aspects, look at the law. There's all these things you need to consider besides just buying a gun, doing the minimum state requirement to get a permit to carry. You need to delve a little bit more into it so you're well-rounded and you are truly ready to employ that firearm to defend yourself, and then you're ready for the aftermath of using that firearm.
Okay, so now here's where the tough questions come in. So I'm a constitutional carry person. I have a license, obviously, but I'm one of those people that I'm of the mindset that we should not have to get a license to carry a firearm because I believe that it is our constitutional right. So I shouldn't have to get a license, and I shouldn't have to, if somebody enters my home and and they're not welcome or they're threatening or whatever, I feel like I should be able to defend myself and not have to give consideration to laws and restrictions and that kind of thing. Okay, so that's where I am with it. So what are your thoughts on constitutional carry as a veteran and having different experience and perspective that I have? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm a full supporter of the Second Amendment and constitutional carry. To me, that they're the same. So I totally support constitutional carry. You just have to, again, it all goes back to if you're going to carry a firearm, you kind of owe it to yourself and the people around you to actually get the training so you're responsible with that firearm. So if they dropped all the licensing and permit requirements in all the states and constitutional carry and carry throughout, I'm all for it. It's already been shown the places that have the highest gun control in the states usually have the most crime. The states where there's a lot of gun ownership and there's laws in place where guys can legally carry, the crime seems to be lower. So we can't ignore that correlation between no guns in some towns and states and guns are allowed, and the crime statistics are completely different.
That's true. Okay, so why do you think that some, knowing all of that, why do you think that some states don't support it?
This is my opinion. I think there's two reasons. One is politicians. It's a means of control. If everybody's armed, I think it makes them feel uncomfortable. They're not used to it. I'm not talking about some sort of, we're going to do a violent overthrow or anything like that. But if you own a gun, you have the ability, to set your destiny when it comes to freedom. And I think some politicians just aren't comfortable with that. They want to control everything. And the other aspect is it's a source of revenue. Now, granted, it's a minor source of revenue for most states, but it is a source of revenue. When you have, say, 200,000 or 300,000 permit holders in a state, and every 5 years they got to, pay $50, $60, $70 to renew their permit, it is generating some money for that state. So it's just another level of income that if you do, constitutional carry, they lose that.
Okay. Okay, so we're getting ready to take another break, but something to think about as we go to this break is, we've talked about the self-defense aspect of, the apocalypse or whatever, just maybe your daily self-defense or what you should do to prepare in case of, it could be anything. It could be an emergency. There's any number of reasons that we need to be prepared for things. Okay, so Jeff, some things to think about on this break are, what other weapons, okay, so this is something that we've talked about in our circles. There are times when a gun, a firearm, unless you have a silencer, you need a different type of weapon, whether it be a knife, it could be a bow and arrow, it could be a blowgun, which sounds crazy, but there are some pretty stout blowguns out there. So I'm going to ask you about firearms or weapons that your thoughts on that, and maybe what you recommend as maybe a secondary. And maybe right now, because of the laws, there are people. I have a couple of very, very good friends who are felons. So right now they can't carry a firearm. So what are their options? So all right, we're going to take a break.
Are you ready? Stand by. Show clear. All right. Thank you. One C. 143. And that looks like a clean run. 150. Woo! And it looks like I got one C, two C's just outside. That's a 138. I'll take it. All right, clean run. That's a 136 clean. Let me show you the targets.
Okay, and we're back. I'm taking a little bit of crap now about my blowgun comment, but I'm gonna explain myself. I'm gonna explain something here. Okay, so in my store, we used to carry an actual, I mean, it was a heavy duty blowgun. It was for small game hunting. And my thoughts, if you're in an apocalyptic situation and for whatever reason you can't use your firearm because they're going to hear it, if I took a blowgun and stuck one of those 8-inch spears through your throat, it's going to stop you, right? All right,
So,
Jeff, you got a problem with blowguns?
Prior to the apocalypse, you need to go down to the rainforest, find that one frog where if you lick the skin, you die, dip your blowgun darts in it, then come back up to where you live, put your darts away, and when the apocalypse comes, you'll be ready. Because honestly, if I get shot with a blowgun, I'm going to punch you in the face with all my strength. That's the result of getting hit with a blowgun.
Okay. So, do you have any thoughts? I just want, this was something I thought of. I have these thoughts that come to me. So, do you have any thoughts on knives or anything else like that? As far as from a self-defense perspective, I carry a switchblade, so.
Yeah, I'm not a big knife guy. If I have to go to a knife, I'd rather just go to a gun. But there's definitely value, in owning tools to defend yourself. Aspatons, the pepper spray, mace, things like that. If your state allows it, I'm all for it because again, the gun is the last resort. So I mean, if somebody wants to get in a fist fight with me and I'm getting my butt whooped, I'm not going to pull my handgun out and use lethal force, just because I'm getting, my butt kicked a little bit. I'd rather have another option, just like a law enforcement officer. He has multiple options on his belt, batons, sprays, things like that. So definitely, having a tiered level of defense with different tools, I think definitely the way to go.
One of the things that I say in my self-defense class is 2 is 1, 1 is none. So if you have 2 weapons on you and for some reason you can't reach one of them or you can't use it, it could be, women like to carry pepper sprays and that kind of thing, which I'm not anti-pepper spray. There actually is very good use for pepper spray, especially if you're just out walking a dog or something, and pepper spray is very effective on animals, not just dogs. But the 2 is 1, 1 is none mindset, I think, is important because you can carry a gun, but there are definitely situations, like you just pointed out, that you might feel threatened, but not to the point that you feel like you're going to lose your life. I've been in a situation where I'm in my car. Of course, I have my gun, I have my switchblade, and then I have it's a pepper gun, but where a homeless man had come up to my window and just he just both hands just smacked on my window, and it startled me. My window was only partially down, but in a situation like that, you're not going to bust a cap in, a homeless person. That'd be terrible. But if he had, maybe tried to grab me out of the car or something and I could use a non-lethal option on someone like that, obviously that's the preference. But keeping that in mind, folks that are watching, I know some cowboys that they feel like, I've just got my gun and, that's all I need. But you could be in a situation where for one reason or another you can't get to it. So having a knife, having some sort of backup, or even a backup, maybe having more than one pistol on you in case you can't get to it.
That's actually something, going back on my military, that's something we actually, back in special forces, we all carry, pistols and knives on us. And the whole point was that is, if somebody's going for your gun and they're on top of you, are not law enforcement. So in the military, and back in my job, it was assumed if they're on you, they're there to get your gun, and you were allowed lethal force. Now that's a military side of the house. So yeah, we do carry knives. If you're going to carry a knife and a gun, a good rule of thumb is always carry the knife opposite of where you carry the pistol. That way, if somebody's going for your gun, you can keep your hand on your gun. Try and keep it in the holster from grabbing it. It allows your other hand to go for the knife. We call it the space maker. You can use that knife to make space, then get to your gun. But one of the biggest mistakes is to put, all your options on one side of your body and, go on the ground with somebody and rolling around. And then, all your hands are tied up trying to keep them from getting all these things. But if you, have your gun on one side, knife, spray on another, that gives you options.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this might be a good time to show one of Jeff's bad ass videos of him shooting. Let's take a minute and look at Jeff shooting.
One C. 143. And that looks like a clean run. 150. Woo. And looks like I got one C, two C's just outside. That's a 138. I'll take it. All right, clean run. That's a 136 clean. Let me show you the targets.
All right, so Jeff, tell us about those videos.
Well, that drill is called the 222 drill. Is created by a retired Delta Force guy by the name of Kyle Lamb. It's an excellent drill because what it does is it quantifies, your skill with a rifle. It's just one of those drills, just that you can work towards. The goal of that drill is to shoot 2 shots on 3 targets, so a total of 6 rounds from the low or high ready, and you want to get 2 seconds or under with good hits is the standard, and then from there you just keep practicing. And I think in that video I was trying to get below 1.5 seconds, which is fairly decent. But again, it's just you go to the gym to work out. You're going to work different muscle groups. The same thing with a firearm. I like to do different drills that press and push myself, to shoot the gun fast and as accurate as I can.
So we're going to start talking about the other aspect of survival. Do you have a few minutes to stick around with us?
Sure.
Okay.
Survival meaning apocalypse, road warrior. I start putting on all leather and eat my pets.
If you do that, we will get a lot of views on this.
Apocalypse, dystopian future, right? So I'm going all out. I'm going road warrior.
All right. So we talk about self-defense. The other part of the apocalypse, what happens when the socialists take over, you have to be able to not only defend yourself, but preserve, self-preservation. And I know that you guys in the military, you do a lot of this type of thing out in the field. You have way more skills than somebody like me ever could have. But so I have a friend, Sean Wilson. He wrote, it's a guide basically on survival. It's called How to Prepare for Survival in 15 Minutes. Now we can't get into all this because it would take longer than 15 minutes to go through it, ironically, but it's very, very good information. There are lots of guides out there on the internet, but this is very important. So for those of us who really believe that you've got to be prepared, and it's not just about the apocalypse or whatever, it's in a situation where hurricanes, or depending on where you are in the world, earthquakes, power outages. When I was a kid, I want to say, you remember things differently when you get older, but we lived out in Hera, and there was a terrible ice storm back in the 80s. And I want to say we were without power, water, running water, anything for about a week, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So being prepared for this type of situation is really, really important. and having having a plan in place. I mean, you can talk about it all day long, but if you don't prepare and actually take action, you're not going to get anywhere. But so one of the things that Sean talks about in this is, he says, a strong mind capable of sharp focus and determination makes everything else easier. You can survive whether you have some reason to keep going, you're just too stubborn to quit, or even if you just don't know what else to do. Toughen your mind and body, accustom both to hardship and in times of plenty and prosperity, so that you're not overwhelmed in lean times or discomfort. That is so very important.
That sounds like fun.
I know. Well, it's not fun. I mean, it's, we're surviving. Jeff made the funny comment earlier about, what did you say about backpacks and people in the woods? What was it?
Your 3-day bug out bag, and after 3 days, there'll be 300,000 people in the woods with their bags all starving.
Yeah, because they only have 3. They're not prepared for anything else. They have their 3-day bug out bags.
Bug out bag.
It's funny because some of us would actually survive, but then I think about all these poor souls that got the deal at Academy and got their bug out bag, and
they're in the woods after 3 days.
Yeah, they're not going to survive, so we're gonna take their food and we're gonna eat their pets because the rest of us are going to survive. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly touch on what Sean says in his plan here, but we'll make sure that that's available. We'll link it. But basically, the letters of survive are an acronym for self-assess, utilize, recognize, value, invest, validate, and educate. So the other quote that I thought was fascinating about this, because you don't think about these things all the time, but he said if civilization is going to collapse, you're going to be so bored occasionally, or you may just want to know how to rebuild it. So acquire and read not just books on survival, bushcraft, medical, and military skills, but the classics, which were written in a more ancient or medieval times, thus provide better context and insight into situations that you're more likely to basically find useful. That is really fascinating. When I was reading through his guide, I thought, holy crap, he said something that I haven't even given thought to. I have all kinds of, survival books and that kind of thing, but he hit the nail on the head with that. So that's pretty cool to think about. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the other aspect of survival, and Jeff may be able to chime in and give us some thoughts on this. So basics, so water. You have to have either water, actual readily available water, a filtration system, purification system, and there are so many out there. If you want to see some super disgusting yet very interesting videos, just look up Life Straw and the various ways people have demonstrated those. I'm not even going to say it. We're not going to display any videos of it because it's super disgusting. But in a situation where you need to survive, having water, that is the number one thing. When people say, well, in a survival situation, what do I need? You got to have water, okay? So water, number one, a way to filter it, because you can't just drink it out of the stream necessarily, or you can't drink it out of a pond or anything like that, but you need a way to purify it or filter it. The other aspect of it is food. Give some thought to food storage. There are some great ones. And Jeff, if you have any that you recommend, MREs, right? Do you recommend any MREs?
No, after 26 years eating MREs in the military, I'm kind of past them.
You'll just starve, huh? You'll eat the neighbor's cat.
Yep, you'll go for the pets.
Yeah. Okay, so food storage, being prepared to hunt, do whatever you have to do to feed your family, feed yourself. And there's so much that goes into this, guys, so please take the time to research this. Don't wait until we have no internet, no way for you to research. Something happens and now you're stuck. Prepare in advance. I can't stress that enough. My family, we have enough food to last for months. And that doesn't even count the guineas and the turkeys in the neighborhood. And that doesn't count eating my neighbor's dogs and cats. That's stuff that I have prepared ready to go. So don't think I wouldn't do it, because I would. So food, shelter. So let's say you can't stay in that nice comfy house of yours. What are you going to do? What if you, so this is something that I give thought to. If I'm, out in the middle of nowhere and I'm driving back and something happens, I'm going to blow your mind. What if an EMP happens? Do I sound like I sound like one of those crazy, I sound like one of those crazy people on some of those podcasts out there. Oh, wait, I am. What if something happens and you can't drive your vehicle all the way back home or to safety? What do you do? How do you get there? Do you keep something in your vehicle so that you have shelter, that you have food? Those are all things to think about. Those tube tents, they're cheap, under $10. The foil blankets, that sort of thing. What do you need to survive? So think about those things, because global warming is going to, really, it's going to end the world in 12 years. So we need to be prepared for it.
Polar vortex?
Oh, what's that?
We just had a polar vortex, didn't we?
I don't know, but we're all still
America
here.
Frozen for a week.
Oh, that's right. That there was something about how switching the poles. Is that what you're talking about? The poles are going to switch sometime in the next 40 years.
I don't know.
Okay.
My dad called from Boston, and it was like -15, so I don't know about the global
Oh,
warming.
yeah. But they had plenty of warning. If you freeze in that I don't even know what to say. It's like the people, they say it's going to flood, and they say, don't get out of your cars. And then you see them on, it's sad. So I'm not trying to just make fun of people who die and, floods. But it's like you were told it was going to flood and not to drive your car through, deep water, and you did it anyway. So some of it's just common sense, like, Andrea Ocasio-Cortez has. Okay, or whatever her name is. So portable light, flashlight, solar, something. And this is very basic, guys. If you actually go online and look this up, or just buy a book on survival, hey, that's what I should do. I should write a book on survival so we can have it out here with these other books. But having a portable light, hey, if you get a flashlight that takes batteries, eventually the batteries are going to go dead. So you need some way to recharge it or have other batteries available. Something that I started taking seriously a few years ago was having medicines on hand, antibiotics, and something that's very important if you are a parent, even if you're not a parent, is Benadryl. Did you know the number of uses Benadryl has? Not only if you have an allergic reaction, think about it. You're surviving. You're in the middle of nowhere. You're in the weeds, and you're building a lean-to, and you get something like poison ivy or something, and you need to relieve it. Benadryl. It also works for anxiety. It has all kinds of crazy uses. It's pretty interesting. But aspirin. So if you have somebody that has a heart condition, there's lots of uses for aspirin, having a needle and thread. There's all kinds of tools that you can have, obviously a knife, and just regular tools, screwdrivers, things like that are important to have. Jeff, jump in if you think of anything that I'm not covering, because I'm almost to the end of my list of things. What's that?
An AR-15.
Oh, an AR-15. Oh, shoot. How could I forget about that? So an AR-15, the most important tool you could have. Consider footwear. So if something happens in the middle of nowhere, and ladies, you're wearing 5-inch stilettos, you're going to be screwed. And that's
But you're gonna be high fashion during the dystopian apocalypse.
Yeah, you're going to be so apocalyptic.
But they came in the bug out bag.
That's right. Okay, so one of the things that I have in my bug out bag, which mine will last me for more than 3 days, just so you know, is those fast flats. So if I normally wear boots and that kind of thing. But if there is that one occasion a year that I happen to be wearing, say, high heels, and I get stranded in the middle of nowhere, I have these shoes. They just fit in your pocket, but you can take them out and put them on, and they're flat, and they have rubber soles. So if I have to go, walking for 30 or 40 miles, I could do it. And something else, Jeff is not going to be interested in this, but women's issues. So when the apocalypse happens, or if there's an emergency, you're going to have days or weeks or months or years. And you're going to need to be able to address your women's issues. So, I mean, you need to have chocolate. All right. The last thing I have on this list, and this is not a very thorough list because there are so many things you really need, is having something to do, because you will get bored. You're out there with your kids or by yourself or with your spouse and you don't want to, you're done talking. Have something to do. Cards, dice, that sort of thing. So, all right, well, think on that while we take a break, and we'll be back.
When I'm with